Does this sound good here from this point?
Yeah, this is great.
Okay. So the whole team here is kind of really getting into that self-branding portfolio, and something that we're really pushing here is the whole case studies, right? Building case studies. And the reason I reached out to Adam, guys, for you guys particularly, is one, Adam's been a great guest on our podcast, and so we've gotten to know each other and following him through the year, seeing he just made a huge release in changing your website, changing your branding, really kind of like your whole scope of how you're even presenting yourself, right?
Everything.
Everything, right? And I thought that would be a really good, inspiring kind of message. He can give a little insight on why, how, what, but then we'll open it up to the questions that you guys have for him specifically. We did kind of look through your site the other day. I want to make sure everybody got a good look at what you're doing and how you're presenting. So I'm going to open it up to you first. Just tell us a little bit what brought you to, one, changing kind of everything, but also, anything you learned along the way that was quite surprising in putting together a whole new case study, whole new website, and identity as a designer.
Yep, awesome. Okay. And before I answer that, can I just quickly, just for my general understanding, in terms of your guys's, what you guys are all interested in or hoping to do, I'm interested to know how many of you guys are more like print or art focused versus being more digitally focused or maybe web focused. So can I just get a show of hands of who is leaning more towards like digital web design? Okay. And then would you guys, the remainder of you guys who didn't raise your hand, leaning a little bit more towards like print, layout, that kind of design?
Yes. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay. There's of course a ton of overlap, but I'm just interested to kind of understand that.
I think also it's hard to kind of, for them to pinpoint exactly maybe what the path might be in the future, because they're, you know what I mean? But it's a good question to ask because it kind of, we start to see where their strengths lie, and I think that's a great question to ask just to see the gauge. So perfect. Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So if you guys looked at my website, my specialty is kind of the point in which fine art and graphic design intersect. And I realized years ago that was what I loved to do. I initially thought I wanted to be a painting major. Ultimately, I got cold feet and decided that was too scary. So I went into graphic design because it felt more stable and it felt like there was more opportunity for work. As I started working through school, I basically saw that the world is working towards digital. I mean, everything is in apps, it's on the web. So there is so much work to do in web and digital design. However, that is not where my passions or my interests lie. I'm really interested in that fine art side of graphic design. So for the last 5 years, I've been working professionally for about 8 years. And for the last 5 years, I've been running my own business here in Denver. And it's taken me a really long time to learn how to properly articulate what it is that I do, who I do it for, and why I do it, which are really important things to start to understand. Can you please send one of those donuts to Denver?
I'm sorry, dude. You're a little too far away.
Gosh, so jealous. So after doing what I'm doing, now professionally by myself for 5 years, for the past 3 years has been when things have really taken off. I've been very fortunate over the last few years to work with, clients like Sharpie, NBC, the Sci-Fi Network. I was on The Real Housewives of Dallas. I've done a lot of crazy things, and that's only happened in the last few years. And through kind of working through all of this and starting to find clarity in what I do, just recently I went through this rebrand because I finally was able, after just doing it for years and talking about it for years and learning for years, I finally felt like it was clear what I do and who I do it for and why I do it, as I've said. So in the past year, I started, my business has grown into more than just myself. For years, it was just me working on everything. In the past year, I've started hiring a lot of contractors. So I have, other designers I use strategists, I use copywriters, I hire photographers, videographers, excuse me. I have all these people that are helping me, and I just hired someone part-time. So previously my website was presented as Adam Vicarel. You know, I'm a one-man shop, I can do all these things. You have a very personalized experience when you work with me. These are all great things, and plenty of illustrators and artists present themselves this way. It's a great way to present yourself. However, what I started to realize is if I'm working with a big client, let's just use NBC as the example, when I'm quoting a project or talking about what I can offer, I started to fear a little bit that these people that are in high up positions that have worked with huge corporations or huge agencies, when they see this one single person being like, yes, that's going to cost $85,000, and I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And I can see them be like, like there's no freaking way that you, that one guy, are going to be able to do all of this, and we're not going to give you that much money. So I decided, because my business is more than me, I want to present myself as more of a studio, because I want to present my services as being a little bit more diverse. And I also, at that time, had really started to hone in on the fact that my specialty, or my niche, is the coalescence or the combination of fine art and traditional design. So it was kind of a two-in-one. I'm presenting myself as an agency, and I'm presenting myself as this niche offering. You know, ultimately, through deciding that, I decided to build out a new website. I don't know if you guys watched the kind of hype reel or the highlight video that kind of highlighted the release of the new website, but I wanted to represent myself and represent my brand with a lot of energy. You know, I bring a ton of enthusiasm and personality to the work that I create, so I wanted that to come through in that video. And then I wanted my individual case studies, because so much of my work has such an infusion of fine art and that design. You know, it's traditional art applied in a strategic sense. I wanted to show that in those case studies. So a lot of my case studies are built out. They're really robust. They show a lot of process, and they explain a lot of my strategy and like the what's and the whys of what I was doing, because I decided that I'm building my portfolio for high-level creative directors or business owners. I don't give a shit what another designer thinks about my website. It is not for them. I want I have one of my mentors is he's a group creative director at one of the largest agencies here in Denver. And he was a creative director at he was a creative director at Disney for 10 years. And then he was a creative director with Kellogg's for 10 years. And he's now a creative director for Red Robin. So he has a lot of amazing experience. He really understands the importance of brand and the integrity of a brand. And he was explaining to me that when a high-level agency hires someone like myself, that creative director is going to spend anywhere from 15 seconds to 1 minute. That is the most time that they will spend on my website. And he said, you need to leave an incredible impression in 15 seconds. So I decided to lead with a high-energy, high-impact video. Right underneath that, I explain very concisely and very clearly exactly what I do. And then directly under that, I give an example of who I do it for. So I show some of my favorite clients. Clients that if any company wants to work with me, they see that and say, okay, we trust this guy. If he's done work for them, he can definitely handle work for us. So that was kind of a long-winded response to your question, Nick, but generally, it was through articulating that things have grown, things have changed, and I needed to represent myself as a business that had adapted with those changes.
So it's more about your perception changed, or who you are has changed, but you wanted the perception to the outside world to change as well.
Exactly. Yep. I wanted my business to be representative, or the perception of my business to be representative of the changes of the business itself.
And I'm so glad you said you designed it for the person who's going to actually hire you, the person that's going to pay you money, not for anybody else. And do you guys get the difference there? Because it's like we're so overblown with our perception on Instagram and everywhere else where, let's say you can share your work there, but don't design for other designers. Design for the person that's going to pay you, going to hire you, right? That's the goal. For
exactly. Well said.
Good. And then when you were looking at everything did you even what influenced the design of it? So you gave us kind of the storyboard, the strategy. When you were designing it, you have so many vast areas to pull from. How did you hone down to like deciding what your overall look and feel was going to be as an agency or a studio?
Yep. So I'm going to pull up my website on the side here so I can see. So as I said, my mentor, he's a high-level creative director, so he gave me a lot of feedback on how to best present my work. So on my website, right when you land on there, I have an animated GIF that shows my logo in a bunch of different logo types. Because one of my strongest, I think, points of difference in terms of what I do is I have a high level of diversity in terms of the style of work that I can create. Some of it is super sexy and refined. Some of it is super rough and looks like it was spit on and kicked down a mountain. And because I have that diverse style offering, I wanted to represent that immediately on my site. So again, I have a logo type that shows a bunch of different styles right away. Realistically, I spent like an hour on that. I didn't actually put a lot of time into it. I one day hope to go back and like really be intentional about it. Immediately under that, have that hype reel. So if somebody only has 15 seconds to a minute on my website, they can see a lot of work really quickly and really feel impacted by my work. Immediately underneath that, I have the what. So let me backtrack. So one of the most important things you can do is immediately convey what you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. So on my website, I say, I am a hybrid creative studio focused on merging fine art with strategic design. And then underneath that, I have specializing in artful branding, lettering, and mural painting. We combine intentional design thinking with fine art techniques to communicate the honest stories of eclectic brands. So again, what is merging fine art, strategic design? Who do I do it for? I do it for eclectic brands. And why? Because I want to help eclectic brands tell honest stories. So really being concise about all of those things helps you decide what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Then scrolling down, I have the clients, so that validates who I am and what I do. I then tease out some of my work, some of my favorite projects. I have a couple client testimonials that further validates the work above. It has been, yes, it's beautiful, but it's been created for these people, and this is what they have to say about it. Underneath that, I talk about my core capabilities. So if someone has taken the time to get this far down at my website, they're definitely interested in working with me. At this point, they're probably wondering, okay, this is the project we have in mind. I wonder if Adams or if Vicarel Studios can execute on that. So that's why I have core capabilities are lettering, art direction, visual identity design, and I list out my primary offerings. From there, I have a few links that I can either elaborate more on what those core offerings are, what they mean, and what I can do within those core offerings, or I have another link that takes you directly to the work itself. Below that, I have a contact tab so that if people are like, I don't need to see anything else, let's work together, they can reach out to me immediately. And that's kind of it. And at the bottom, I have a navigation in the footer so people can start linking out if they make it that far. So again, I was very intentional about how I laid my site out because I was thinking of it from the perspective of if it's a high-level creative director, how are they going to navigate this? If it's a business owner, how are they going to navigate this? And then I built all of my communication, all of my layout, all of my copywriting, all of that was focused around how these people want to be spoken to. And then, I did it with a little bit of my own flair, of course. I want my brand to come through, but I really focused on not how I want to communicate, but how these high-level people want to be communicated to.
Cool. I'm going to ask one last question before I open it up to you guys, but I'm real curious because going through it, you can see how much you document your work, right? So even when it's you on site or you sketching or even the gritty stuff, how purposeful are you throughout your day in documenting your stuff so you have great assets to add to your case studies?
It is really hard because documenting it properly takes a lot of time and a lot of resources.
Yeah.
So it is, it's the blessing and the curse of being self-employed is I have to do everything by myself, or I have to pay somebody to do it for me. So Nick, to loosely answer your question, I kind of assess up front the client and the project. Is it likely that this is going to be something I'm going to be promoting in the future? If so, I might be a bit more intentional about documenting my process along the way. But generally, more often than not, it's less about documenting the process as I go. Normally, I like to just flow and do my thing. And then I save literally everything I create just in like manila folders. And then ultimately, if the project is portfolio worthy, I then set everything up and do a photo shoot and basically stage everything. So I'm not necessarily taking photos of every sketch I'm doing, but at the end, if I'm like, okay, this is going in the portfolio, I have all the sketches, I can lay them out, make them look beautiful, and then start photographing.
Cool. That's a great tip because like you should be keeping everything. I know a lot of times too, even with your digital, anything you have as digital files, you might delete something and not have it, but save every sketch, save every file in the development because you're right. Then you decide when it's all said and done, are you presenting it?
Yep, exactly. Cool. And more than anything, I've learned if you are able, it doesn't make sense for every brand or for every business, but if you're able to give your clients a little bit of insight in the process, you know, a little peek behind the curtain, if you will, so they can understand how much time, energy, research, and passion goes into what you're creating, it validates further in your client's mind that the work that you've created is done right and it is the proper solution. So again, I like to show a little bit of that process because if I'm charging someone, you know, $2,000 to draw the word blueberry, that seems a bit ridiculous. But if I show this beautiful composition of, you know, 40 different iterations of that word blueberry drawn, and I explain that, you know, these bulbous letter forms are inspired by the roundness of the blueberries themselves, or, you know, whatever it may be, that really starts to give validation to the creation process, and that gets your clients on board with what it is that you're actually creating.
Perfect. Cool. All right, I'm going to open it up to you guys. So you guys have a bunch of questions. I'll give you back some of the cards too. You want to go first, John? Yeah. So head on up there just so we can hear you.
Good evening, Adam. My name's Johnny. Nice to meet you.
What's up, Johnny? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us. So just immediately something I seen on your website right away was the cannabis project. And that was something I was really excited to do here in school. I felt like I was one of the ones to break that barrier here as well, kind of step out of that comfort zone. And it was really cool to get like, you know, the interaction with my classmates about that. But so breaking that barrier into the cannabis culture, did it change your clientele? And like what did it affect you in any way, or how was that? Like how was the transition into that?
Yeah, great question. It was something that when I initially started working with cannabis companies, I was very aware that some people are not okay with cannabis. Other people are totally fine with it. You know, living in Denver, Colorado, it was pretty quickly a little bit less of a concern because it's very destigmatized here. But ultimately, so for me, what I have learned through taking on that project is if it's presented in let me backstep. So I acknowledge that some people might come to my website and see that he works for weed companies, and they might be turned off by that. And you know, to be frank, if somebody is not interested in working with me because I've worked with a weed company, I probably don't want to work with them either. You know, I personally don't really smoke weed, you know, here and there maybe, but it's like, it's not like a big part of my life really. So I'm not afraid to show this work and to show that, you know, more than anything, I wanted to show I have the ability to come into an industry that is absolutely exploding. It is evolving so incredibly quickly. And I wanted to show that through applying, you know, classic design principles with an artful touch, I'm able to really elevate a cannabis brand in a way that helps them appear professional and premium and really helps them, you know, sell their services. So I kind of looked at it as less of a taboo thing, like oh, this is weed. And more so, I looked at it as this shows that as a business, I can really take what can be a touchy subject or a difficult industry to really thrive in, and I can help a business excel through my services. So I actually saw it as an exciting opportunity. And more than anything, because the cannabis industry has so much money and is growing so quickly, I was really excited to showcase that work because I can't even explain to you, Johnny, how much money cannabis companies, they don't know what to do with their money because everybody just wants to buy weed. So it's like, it is a great industry to be able to show that you understand because there is endless work, because everybody wants to get into it, because there's so much opportunity. So I truly saw it as a step in the right direction for me. And lastly, as a final thought, I'm interested in fitness and wellness, and in many ways, cannabis is used as a medicine. So in some ways, depending on how you look at it, you can almost see this project as a project that is in the wellness space or an alternative medicine. So I kind of take the spin of it's like a healthy thing, kind of.
Makes sense. Appreciate it for that.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
In 2 or 3 years, that's the category it's probably going to be in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cutting edge.
I gotta say too, I think it was neat that you took it and at first thought the garden variety one didn't come across as that right off the bat. So it shows that branding is very new to this world now that it is legal in these states, and now good branding and good design can come to that industry finally. Because it almost was like undercover kind of design back in the day. Like everything looked exactly the same in that industry. But now it's awesome. No pun intended.
Yeah, really, everything. They're coming from a world of smiley faces, weed leaves, and everything green.
Yeah.
And so as designers, we have the opportunity to bring elevated design thinking to what is essentially a blank slate.
Yeah.
So it is a really exciting industry to design within. And Nick, you done work within the industry?
Nothing yet. Not yet.
Okay. I feel like you both would be great in it.
You said the same, a very similar thought. Like 5 or 6 years ago, being approached by them, it felt a little odd. But now, it was almost like, you're right, it's almost like, what a challenge to do. It would be a great opportunity,
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Leah, you want to go? Go for it.
Oh, nice. Hey, I'm Will.
I will.
So looking at your website, first of all, I want to say that I love the BlackBerry.
BlackBerry Felix.
Yes, I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
So I see that you're in the food and beverage industry a lot, and including the marijuana one. How do you get into that? Like how do you approach, or do you have to get approached? Like how? Because that's what I want to do. I want to do food and beverage, mainly alcohol, beer, stuff.
Yep. And really quick, Will, are you familiar with either Kevin Cantrell or Chad Michael's studio?
Chad Michael's studio? No.
So Chad Michael's studio and Kevin Cantrell, you should definitely just write their names down. 2 incredible designers. They both have a very distinct style. It's kind of similar, but incredible designers within that industry, and definitely worth checking out their work. But to answer your question, so my first intro into the beverage industry was with New Belgium, which I was very lucky because they're a pretty big name in the beer world, and in a lot of the talks that I give, I really speak to the importance of networking. I have received some of my most incredible opportunities through people that I know, as opposed to the opportunity itself. In my talks, the point that I make is your network is your net worth. So it's like the more people you know, the better relationships you build, the more opportunity you have to financial or career growth. So specifically, the New Belgium opportunity, I spoke at an event called Ladies, Wine, and Design. I don't know if you can tell, but I am not a lady. So I was an anomaly in that group. However, the group itself is put on by Jessica Walsh of Sagmeister and Walsh, or now her own agency, and Walsh. This group is all about empowering females in the creative community. and they brought me in because this particular week, this particular month, they were speaking about turning your side passion or your side hustle into a full-time career. And that's kind of what I did with lettering. So I went and I talked about my story and how I first started lettering and how I just endlessly pursued it, and how a few years later, it comprised 90% of my income. And it was a really exciting transition to go from just doing it for fun to then doing it professionally. So as I told this story, at the end, it was a group of like 15 women. One of the women came up to me and just basically said candidly, I'm in a very transitional point in my life and my career. Your story really resonated with me. Thank you so very much for like telling us about this process. And there's a sociological phenomenon called the law of reciprocity. And it basically speaks to the idea that when you deliver value to somebody, they have this innate inclination or desire to deliver value back to you. And it's less about like, I help you, you help me, and more so the idea of I'm going to give and give and give because I know through giving and supporting the community that in some way it will turn and come back to me. So lo and behold, 3 months later, this woman who said thank you, she reached out to me and said, hey, Adam, I'm the account director at this agency. New Belgium is one of our clients. We would love to work with you to help promote one of these new beers. In helping market and promote one of their new beers, I kind of went above and beyond in that project, and it then led to the opportunity to design the label for Blackberry Felix. So truly, my entrance was just through continued networking and connecting with people. But I would say if you are very interested in getting into a specific specific industry, or if any of you guys are interested in cannabis or wellness or fitness, you should be intentional about building a portfolio that showcases that type of work. You need your clients to look at your work and see that this work is made for this industry. So whether that be personal work or personal projects, about 6 years ago, my portfolio had one client project, and the rest of it was all personal work, all mock-ups. It was all fake. It was all lies. But it enabled me to get the work that I wanted to do. So mine was all built around branding and around illustration. That enabled me to get client projects that had branding and illustration. Then I updated my portfolio to have it was half client work and then half personal work. Currently my portfolio is more like 80% client work. And I actually have a photographer in my studio. He's doing bigger projects than I am, and his portfolio is basically 70% personal work and 30% client work, because he continues to shoot the work that he wants to shoot and put it out into the world to show, this is what I want to do, this is what you hire me to do. And as a last point, Will, the Chad Michael studio, if you check him out, his work is like just so on point. It is so beautiful. And he literally got his first start in the in the beverage industry because he did a personal project. He made a custom label design and filled it with his own. Actually, I don't even know if he filled it with whiskey. He might have just filled it with like apple juice or something. But he sent it to like 120 alcohol companies that he wanted to work with. So he probably spent a few $1,000s making this. But through that, he got a few projects, and those few projects paid him, $20,000. And then he was able to then show that work, and then he just got hired over and over and over again. And now all he does is alcohol business, and that was only because of one personal project that he did.
Go for it. Come on up, just so we can hear you. Come on. Come on. He just said networking's important. Get in there.
What's one annoying question you get asked all the time that makes your eyes roll like, ugh, this question again about your job?
I get a lot of people, specifically my friends, that like laugh when I say that I'm busy. They're like, "You just draw letters for a living? Like, do you actually just like?" It's a lot of like, "What do you even do?" And it's at first it would annoy me, but literally for years, I didn't know how to properly articulate what it is that I do. I knew I was an artist. I knew I was a designer. I did some brand, I did some lettering, I painted murals, I did graphic design. Like, I just didn't know how to concisely say, like, this is what I do. So I think part of that constant question was because I personally did not have that clarity. And fortunately, now that I do, people have a firmer understanding, and that question is diminished massively.
I think, what's funny? Can you speak a little more to, like, when you compare yourself to maybe friends and family that aren't in the business, like, your happiness with your job and what you've chosen, compared to, like, what you see others with frustration, 9-to-5s and everything? You say, too, they ask if you're busy all the time and what do you actually do? But on the flip side, you're more than happy, and enthusiastic about the career you've chosen, probably more than anybody I know,
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to find myself in a position and to have built a career that truly is my. It was just a side passion or a side hustle that is now a job. So I am very, very lucky to do what I do, and I see it for that. I acknowledge that many people work a job so that they can make money to then afford to do what they want to do outside of their job. And that's not to say that all I want to do is design. I also love to travel. I love to skateboard. I love to rock climb. A lot of these things, I wish I could do more, but work gets in the way. However, I wake up in the morning and I am stoked to work. Like, I come in here, I'm drawing, I'm building a business, I'm creating the work I want to do, I'm painting, I'm meeting people. I just had a meeting this morning with a few women from Lululemon, and we just talked about ideas together. We talked about live murals and event paintings and all of these really cool ideas where it is a dream come true that I can meet with a brand like Lululemon and I can just be like, blah, like, these are my ideas. And they're just like, oh, yay, here's yoga pants. And it just is like, it's amazing. And so I've realized, I personally, the reason I started doing what I'm doing was because I spent about a year traveling before I moved to Denver. And right before I moved here, my last basically month traveling, I spent a month in the Philippines volunteering. And I was absolutely blown away by the fact that the village that I was volunteering in had recently been destroyed by a typhoon, and I was helping rebuild homes. These people were so poor, they had literally almost nothing. However, every day, they were so happy, they were smiling, they were drinking beers, they're hanging out, they're just having a good time. They loved life. And every night I would lay in my tent and I was just like, why is everyone here, they have nothing, but they act like they have everything? And then on the flip side, in the States, people are anxious and they're sad and they're depressed and they're overwhelmed. And after a month of really parsing through this, I basically processed that in the States, a lot of people are working jobs that they hate to make money that they don't need, to buy shit that they don't want. And they're doing all of this to prove or to put up this facade of success to other people. And pardon my French, but who gives a fuck what other people think? It's it is important to do what you love to do and be passionate about it. And if you're happy, who cares? So when I moved out here, it was all right, I'm going to build a business doing what I want to do. And it was more about being satisfied, fulfilled on a daily basis. And through doing that consistently, my clients and my partners see that passion coming through, and then it excites them to work with me. So I'm literally in a fortunate position where just through being myself and doing what I want to do, I am attracting the work. And that is because I have found and chosen a career path that is right for me. So it's a really lucky position. And I see a lot of people who, they're like, yeah, I'm making $150,000 a year. But they wake up in the morning and they're like, I hate everything. And they work for 8 to 9 hours and they're like, I hate everything. And they come home and they just watch TV and then they do it again the next day. And then on Wednesday, they wake up, they go to work, and they come home and they binge watch Netflix. And I, on the other hand, I'm building a business. I'm doing amazing things, and I'm like really pushing myself to grow as an individual. And that is the most fulfilling thing I could ever ask for.
Yeah, and I think we all stress that's like what a great field we're in, because that could be the possibility. You know what I mean? 100%.
Yes, we have the ability as designers to have an idea and bring it from start to finish.
Yeah.
Like we can have the idea, we can assess who is the idea for, we can build a website, we can build the product, and then we can sell it. We can do it all.
All right. Ready? Go for that. Sorry, it's a big class.
Oh, it's good.
So hi, my name's Anthony.
Hey, Anthony.
So I know your day-to-day is probably always changing, but do you think you could maybe give us a rundown of a day in your professional life?
Yeah, good question. So you are correct in that truly every day is quite different. And I think that's partially because the offerings of my business are very diverse, but also partially because as an entrepreneur or as a single person business, my roles are starkly different. You know, sometimes I am the sales guy. Sometimes I am the designer. Sometimes I am the CEO, or the boss, or the accountant. So again, that reason is very different. But in a given day, I wake up between 5 and 6. I generally will either get up and immediately kind of like get out the door, go work out, and then come into the studio, or I will take the morning slow and work from home in the morning, drink some coffee. Generally, my morning work, like super early, first thing, I like to do something that's easy on the brain. So sometimes that's posting on Instagram. Sometimes that's doing like inspiration searching. I kind of forgot, prior to that, I try to do a little bit of reading or like self-reflection in the morning to kind of just like start my day off with focus and clarity. When I get into the studio, the first thing I do is I will basically map out my day in 30 and 60-minute increments. So if I get in here at 7 a.m., it's something called the Pomodoro technique. And what I do is I will write down, I'll basically have an ongoing list. Whenever I'm doing anything, if I think like, ooh, I need to do this, I just put it in a little notes app, and I just note what it is that I need to do. And then in the morning I get in here, and I will map out my entire day up through about 2 or 3 p.m. So I'll allocate time for my lunch, for answering emails, for everything. And what that enables me to do is keep my day on track. So if I complete one task, instead of like scrolling through my email or hitting Instagram or doing something totally random, I immediately move on to the next task, and that enables me to stay on task, to stay productive, and get as much done in a single day as possible. I allow for a few extra hours, so again, I map out until about 2 or 3. I normally keep the afternoons open for potentially for meetings, potentially for overflow of work. And for years, I would normally work until about 7, 8, 9 p.m. Now I've found a much healthier balance, and I leave around 5. And I'm an avid rock climber, and so the climbing gym that I go to is right across the street. So I generally do a workout every evening. And then after that, in the evenings, I come home, and depending on the day, I'll either go to a networking event, go like get beers with friends, go just relax at home and make some dinner and just chill. And then some evenings, I'll either work on some client stuff or I'll work on personal projects. But I've learned from my own experience, if I'm working late into the evening, I make sure that it is fun, creative work. As running a business, there's constantly everything to do. Answering emails, making pitch decks. There's a lot of BS that you need to do. So I make sure that if I'm doing late night work, that it's something really fun like illustration or lettering. And can you hold on 1 second? I'm going to turn up the air conditioning in here because I am flying an egg. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Christine.
Hi, Christine.
So one of my original questions was, how did you get your foot in the door when you first started out? But then I remember you said about when you started like the mural stuff that you've faked it till you make it type thing. And
Yep.
I'm sure when you did get the initial interview as well, like it must have been nerve-wracking and all that stuff, especially when, I don't know, at least for me personally, it's like the gap between like how much experience you really need to get into the work field as opposed to like, you know. So how did you in your personal experience gain that confidence to be able to convince them to hire you without that experience?
Yep, that's a great question. So I'm a firm advocate for doing personal work and constantly promoting whatever work that it is that you're doing. So, you know, we're all in, you'll find that once you get into your making stuff, and all of the work that you're creating.
That's good. I think our network connection is going down a bit. Hold on. Double check.
Yep.
All right. I think we're good. Give it a shot.
Good. Okay. So all of this work that you'll be producing between now and forever moving forward, it is doing you no good just sitting on a hard drive. You know, nobody's going to see it, and even if you don't like it a lot, it's doing you a lot more good being out in the world than it is sitting on your hard drive. So again, as you're producing things for work, personal projects, whatever it is, there are so many resources like Dribbble, Behance, Instagram, Tumblr, your website, TikTok, you know, whatever. There are so many places that you can be promoting your work and what you're creating. So Christine, to answer your question, I personally built up the confidence through constantly putting that work out there and talking about it. You know, we have these resources that we're able to just promote our work, and you know, what constantly putting your work out there does is it forces you to talk about it, and as you talk about your work more and more, you become more comfortable with speaking about the process, or speaking about your strategy, or speaking about your idea. And the better you are at doing that, that essentially is like being better at sales. So if you've never painted a mural before, or you've never done, you know, hand lettering for packaging design, if you've been doing personal work and fake talking about it for months or even years, the first time a client comes around to do that, it feels just like every other time you've done it. So it's almost like practice makes perfect, where you just gotta do it on your own time and on your own terms before you ever get hired to do it, so that when you get hired to do it, you're comfortable already. Aaron Draplin actually says in one of his talks, be ready when the big leagues call. So it's all about just preparing under the radar so that when the opportunity hits, you're like, boom, I got that.
Anybody? Open to you guys. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Hi, Adam. How do you decide how much of your process you should show?
And can you be a bit more specific in terms of, are you talking about like on Instagram with my clients?
Like in your case studies, because I saw like you showed a lot of your process, so I'm wondering how much of it you don't show and how much of it you do show.
Yep. So that is very specific to, I think, to the individual. You know, because I personally have so much like tactile process involved in everything I create. I talk a lot about process. I stress the importance of process, and I think showing the process gives a little bit of insight into that artful side of my business. I've chosen to show a lot of it. I think there are plenty of other designers, websites, and agencies that show no process. All they show is like the pristine final product, and that's totally fine. But I personally chose, or I personally decided that a high-level creative director, you know, it's very easy to show beautiful work. Anybody can do an awesome mock-up of a fake beer can. Literally anybody can do it. So what I want to do is show process that that explains this is why I did it, this is how I did it, and what it does to build validation behind that process.
That's so true because all the tools we have.
Why are you laughing?
We're laughing because he just posted a beer mock-up. And we got a lot of good insight
Yes.
from it, but we didn't see no process.
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just,
Oh, I know.
it's showing that process validates how you got there.
That's why we were laughing. But I think what's interesting about that is the tools have allowed us to maybe to go right to the end result so quickly, particularly with everything that's happening with the creative software, mock-ups and things like that. So you're right. I think that's where you can differentiate yourself, especially as a young designer, is showing that process. Like you want to know how you solve the problem. That's what people want to see. You can't just, it's like a math problem. You can't just show the answer. You got to show how you got there. And I think that's a great reason. And that's why save everything, or have people take a picture of you during that process or whatever it is. Especially with your phones and everything. You got them ready to go.
Yep. And Nick, I think I just want to quickly say just a point on that, because that was an amazing point, is when you show some of your process, it helps your clients understand that you listened to them, you understood their problem, you understand who their audience is, and you made specific intentional decisions for their audience. And process is one of the best ways to show that.
Perfect. All right, we got time for a few more. Anybody else? Open question. Yeah. Get up there so you can hear you.
It's Monse again.
Oh, hey!
So my question was more so, I guess, how long does it take you to build your case study, and do you do it once you're done with the whole project, or as you're going with the project?
Yeah, it takes an unfortunately long time. The case studies on my website, they really took a while. I'm trying to think realistically how long some of them took. There's a huge variance. Some of them are a lot more robust than others, but hours and hours and hours and hours. Maybe as much. Some of the more robust ones, like Native Roots or Garden Variety, those ones probably took me 10, 20 hours to build. But because those projects, if I get another one, those projects pay tens of thousands of dollars. So it is worth the time to do it right and show it well, so that once it's out there, a client can see there's a lot of value in this work, and we're willing to pay a lot of money for that. And then to the second part of your question, Martha, almost all of my case studies are built out after the project has been created. So I do make a point to document some of that process as I go. I literally just take selfie pictures. We're very lucky that our iPhones take high quality photos. Sometimes I will use DSLR to get a little bit higher end photos. But the majority of my documentation happens after the fact. I decide this project I want to build a case study for. I always set aside all of my sketching and all of my processing and just keep it in a folder. So if I do need to come back to it, I have it for reference, or for showing that documentation.
Are you thinking big picture before you even start the case study? Just storyboarding it? I mean, quick wireframe of and then you fill it in?
Yep. Yeah. I actually spend most of my time, I think. I do. So basically, my process for building out a case study is I will go through Pinterest, through Behance, through Dribble, through Instagram, all of those places, and I'll be looking for similar projects or similar concepts, and start to pick and pull things that I like. So maybe I decide I really like the cadence of showing a realistic photo and then a super flat, vector digital, and then showing a couple sketches, and then go back to a really nice photo of a final product, and then showing a more digital vector, and then showing more process. So I'll actually pull inspiration, and I'll lay it all out in an artboard and Illustrator of random projects, other people's images, and then I will build my individual images or individual like slides within my case study based off of those.
Perfect. That makes sense, guys? So it's like wireframing it the same way. But I love that you said that. We had one studio came in and showed that even just the scalability, like scale one image, crop it in really close. Next one, make it a little bit more wide and open so you're seeing it. Then go into some detail. Kind of the same like you said. Show variety. Don't make it vector, 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 and lose the audience.
Yep, variety and diversity keeps people interested as they continue to scroll.
Cool. All right, one more question, guys. Who's got one? Anybody? Yes, go for it. Come on up. Just use the chair. It's perfect.
Hi.
Yes.
My name's Blanca, and I actually had two questions, but they kind of go hand in hand, so maybe you get to answer them together. So before going into your own company, how many years prior did you have, or how many years prior would you recommend for someone who wanted to start something up on their own?
Yep. Was that the two questions?
No, so the second one is, you said, you were like the marketing guy, the sales guy, the accountant. So did you learn that within the field, or where did you get all that knowledge from?
Got it. Great questions. Yep. Great entrance and exit. So to the first part of your question, I truly believe that 99% of people should work at a business, an agency, a studio, somewhere before ever trying to work by yourself. I personally worked for 2.5 years at a company before working on my own, and for the first 2.5 years of working on my own, I wasn't really doing much work directly with clients. I was doing more work where I would go into an agency as just a freelancer, and I would work on projects they gave me. So it was almost still like having an actual job. So the reason I think that's important is you learn a lot in school, but you learn so much at your first job. You learn, like you see firsthand how professionals are, what's their process like, how they're presenting work, how they're selling work, how they're talking to clients, how they're dealing with good client feedback, bad client feedback. Like you literally learn everything. And all of that stuff, if you don't have that experience, you can't learn it by yourself. So again, for that reason, I think it's important to go work for a company. I don't think there's any like magic number for how long you should do it. I think that kind of varies person by person. I think some people could do it for a little bit less. 2.5 years is not that long. Other people will work for 10, 15, 20 years in agencies or in studios and then start their own thing. Truly the experience you have at an agency is invaluable. And more than anything, what it gives you is the experience of working under people. So you're going to go in as a junior designer or just like an entry-level designer, and you're going to have designers, senior designers, art directors, and creative directors above you, and you're going to learn so much from them. So that experience is invaluable. And then the second question, part 2, what was it again?
It was, you said that you were an I know, like, piggy back and forth. You said that you did accounting, marketing, and so you were the all-around person. Where did you get that experience from?
Yes, got it.
YouTube.
So all of that I learned basically on the fly as I started doing it. So it was years of tripping and falling and stumbling and learning from mistakes and failing over and over again is kind of how I learned. Hold on, I need to take a note really quick. I'm giving a talk in a week, and that I just thought of a point because of that question. It was truly through experiencing it. In school, I learned literally nothing about business. So I learned all of that was self-taught. So a lot of it was, again, just through trials and tribulations. I spent a lot of time reading blogs, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, there's so many amazing resources out there. And I think if you're hungry or you're thirsty for that knowledge, you can get out there and you can find it. I also, made a point to hire people or to get support for the stuff that I was not good at. So I was really bad at tracking my finances and doing my taxes. All of that stuff is not my forte. So I hired a CPA to do that for me. So now I pay him, anywhere between $500 and $1,500 per year, which maybe sounds like a lot of money. However, the amount of time it saves me, I can, with the time that it saves me hiring him, I'm able to make a lot more money than $500 or $1,500. So I'm happy to pay him to do that for me. So yeah, concisely, I learned as I went, but I also made the point to hire help where I needed help.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Last chance. We good? We good? Sure? Last parting tips. If you were a graduating senior, you can go back. What would you really stress to them to do in these last few months before they get out there in the real world?
Yeah, I would stress the importance of having a portfolio that represents the work that you want to be doing. You do have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt when you're first coming out of school. When I came out of school, I had no frick clue what I wanted to do. Literally no idea. I didn't even know what I could do. So when I first started, my portfolio was diverse. I showed some web design. I showed some branding. I showed some brochure layout. I showed some poster designs. So I did show a little bit of everything. But as I've grown as a designer, I've become more and more specific about what I show, how I show it, and how I talk about it. And as one other point, I would stress the importance of networking. And I don't just mean going to networking events and giving your business card. I mean really connecting with people and talking to people and seeking advice. When I first started out and I moved to Denver, I did a lot of coffee meetings where I would just ask somebody that I looked up to in the design community, and I would just email them and say, hey, my name's Adam Vicarel. I just started freelance designing. I love this project that you did. I'd love to buy you coffee and ask you a few questions about how you got to where you're at. So use people around you. Use the design community as a resource. We don't all have to fail the same way over and over again. We can use each other to grow and to avoid some of those trials and tribulations. So, again, as you start to get into your careers, ask your senior designer, ask your art director, ask your creative director to get coffee, to get breakfast, every other month, and just ask them questions. Ask how you're doing, ask how you can do better, ask how they got to where they're at. Also reach outside of your jobs. I truly have learned so frickin' much from just asking people questions, and it has truly proved to be invaluable. So that I think that truly those would be the two of the best pieces of advice I think I could offer. And actually, I have one more. I think acknowledging that what you do as a designer, you really love it. We have a unique opportunity that our passions and our jobs can be the same thing. It is, in some ways, you might work more than some of your friends, but if you do it right, you can truly build the most idyllic life that you can imagine. And that is truly made possible through being persistent and constantly creating stuff. I really sucked at design when I graduated. And I had no right trying to start a business. And it is only through being persistent and constantly making stuff and constantly putting it out there that I've been able to build an actual business.